Good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for braving the really difficult weather conditions that we have this evening. We appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate our fellow New Yorkers who are joining us on the live stream. Um, Welcome to this hearing on the Commission on Government Efficiency. My name is Patrick Gaspard, and I'm honored to be the chair of this commission. We're here tonight because New Yorkers deserve and need a government of the possible, one that can urgently build infrastructure, promote small business growth, and make the city more livable with accessible childcare, affordable groceries, accessible services for all. The task that we are undertaking is a review of the entire charter of the city of New York to build a 21st century government that New Yorkers need. Now, we're going through this process of reviewing the charter, and there's the expectation that in November of this year, there will be important items related to charter reform that are on the ballot. But only if voters agree to the changes on the ballot at an election will those changes take the full force of law and come into effect in this city. I know that I speak for all of my fellow commissioners when I say that we are committed to hearing from a broad cross-section of New Yorkers and pursuing the very best ideas that surface during these hearings. We've had several public hearings held across boroughs. We've heard from experts, community leaders, elected officials, and members of the general public who are interested and excited in the opportunity to join with us to make durable and lasting change. Please understand that this is an independent, nonpartisan commission. In making our recommendations to city voters, we're bound only by our judgment and our collective values. We'll pursue ideas irrespective of who they come from and regardless of who supports those ideas. Joining me in this task on this commission are Vice Chair Emma Wolf, Secretary Susan Kang, Marco Carrion, Henry Garrido, Ruth Messenger, Theodore Moore, Anna Oliveira, Dawn Pinnock, Carlina Rivera, Esther Rosario, Mark Shaw, Barika Williams, Kathy Wild, and joining us virtually tonight is Commission Member Kapil Longani. Although, as I said, we will be considering the entire charter, the commission is looking in particular at the processes and procedures built into our charter that we can update to deliver more efficient services to New Yorkers with excellence. Today, we're focused on the issue of public space. Public space is about how we all live together. It's the connective tissue in the places where we see each other, the places where we hear each other, places that can help to be democratizing forces in welcoming all to our great city. We spend so much of our time navigating public spaces and their functionality, their safety, their cleanliness, the degree to which they facilitate joy, all contribute to the livability of New York City as a whole. Tonight, we'll hear from New Yorkers with real ideas about how to build better public spaces more efficiently. That said, we are going to welcome testimony on all topics, but we are primarily focused tonight on public space. So to that end, we're going to generally front load speakers who are on that theme while still working to assure that we cover a diversity of ideas and hear from as many of you as we quite possibly can. And I'm going to emphasize the possible here. The goal is to complete the meeting on time by 8 p.m. Should you be interested in testifying and you have not yet had a chance, either in person or online, and you can see that we're getting closer and closer to 8 p.m., please know that you have the opportunity to submit your testimony in writing online on our platform or to attend one of the other hearings that we will be holding. There are, after tonight, there are 6 additional public hearings that we will post, that you'll be invited to, that you can come and engage with us on. Thus far, in the hearings that we've had in Manhattan and the Bronx, we've heard from over 538 New Yorkers. Approximately 220 of them or thereabouts have submitted written testimony to us. It's been really enlightening, really inspiring. And I know that in addition to the specific recommendations that we make to change and transform the charter, there are other reforms that are not charter specific that my commission members and I have heard in these hearings that I'm confident will be taken up by this mayor, this city hall, and by the commissioners who ably lead city agencies. I want to say just a few words about how the meeting is going to unfold tonight. Before we hear from the public, we have some expert speakers from the Department of Transportation joining us. We have Michelle Craven, Associate Deputy Commissioner of Cityscape and Franchises, who will be presenting on revocable consent, and Eric Beaton, Deputy Commissioner of Transportation, Planning and Management, who will be presenting on major transportation projects. These presentations are being made tonight in response to inquiries that we received in prior hearings. Following their presentations, we'll then open it up to your participation. For members of the public who wish to participate either in person or virtually, please know that I will toggle between those of you who are here despite the rain and how windswept we all are, and those who are online. I know that Councilmember Moreno from Staten Island is online and wishes to make a brief intervention tonight, and I'll let him do so at the top. But following the council member, your testimonies will then be invited in panels of 2 each, and each individual presenter will have 3 minutes, no more than 3 minutes to make your interventions. And I will really stress and govern over those 3 minutes. And I hope that you will front load your very precise charter recommendations in your presentation. And as I said, we'll do our best to hear from everybody by 8 p.m. tonight. Before we proceed further with the formal hearing, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes from our hearings on June 9th in Manhattan, June 10th in the Bronx, and June 11th in Brooklyn. Is there a motion? Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the minutes have been adopted. So I'd like to now, before we move to our expert testimony, I'd like to give the council member from Staten Island an opportunity to weigh in on these proceedings. Council member, as I invite you in, I want to apologize to you in advance because I'm aware that you were actually online and you had hoped to testify in a previous hearing, but we failed to turn to you in that moment. So I give you my personal apology for having failed to do so. I'm excited that we have you here tonight, and I know that we'll be seeing you in person tomorrow in Staten Island.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that very, very much. It's very kind of you, and I realize what a difficult job that you have navigating public input, not only from elected officials, but the public. Good evening, not only to you, but all the members of the commission. Very, very special hello and acknowledgement to my former colleague, Carlina Rivera, who I got to serve with all too briefly. But in the time that I was able to observe her in the city council, she certainly made our body better, and I have no doubt that she's going to make this commission better. I'd be surprised if she hasn't already. Hello to our fellow New Yorkers, not only who braved the rain, but everybody watching wherever they happen to be. My name is Frank Morano, and I have the privilege of representing the people of Staten Island South Shore in the City Council. And I want to thank the Commission for undertaking what is, in many ways, one of the most important conversations in government, not just tonight's focus about public spaces, but the broader focus of how do we make government work better? Too often, government measures success by process. The public measures success by results. People don't care how many meetings were held. They care whether their pothole was filled. They don't care how many reports were written. They care whether they can get a permit without waiting months. They don't care how many agencies are involved. They care whether somebody takes responsibility. Government should be efficient, accountable, and understandable. And tonight, I'd like to offer 2 proposals that I believe would advance all 3 of those goals. First, I urge the commission to place on the ballot, whether it's this year or if you end up doing a 2-year commission next year, a proposal allowing city council members to appoint one half of the members of their local community boards. Currently, community board appointments are made exclusively by borough presidents. I have great respect for borough presidents and the work they do, but community boards are intended to be the closest link between residents and local government. The elected official closest to the people is often the local council member. We're the officials attending civic meetings, hearing constituent complaints, navigating land use disputes, and answering calls about quality of life issues every day. We know the civic leaders, the block association presidents, the PTA members, the veterans, the small business owners, the community advocates who make our neighborhoods work. If community boards are truly intended to reflect their communities, I think it makes sense that the officials directly elected by those communities should have a meaningful role in selecting their membership. This isn't a partisan idea. I think it's a very democratic idea. It's all about accountability and efficiency. If residents are unhappy with the direction of a community board, they should know who helped appoint its members. Shared appointment authority creates shared accountability. Right now, we don't have that. And importantly, this proposal already enjoys majority support in the New York City Council. A majority of council members have signed on to this legislation advancing this reform. However, because this would require a charter amendment and because this commission will likely be placing questions before voters this November, the most practical path forward is through this commission. If we believe in public input, let the public decide. Put the question before the voters. And my second recommendation, very briefly, concerns efficiency, but it's also related to the community boards. Today, New York City's community district boundaries and city council district boundaries frequently overlap in ways that create confusion, duplication, and inefficiency. One community board may be represented by multiple council members. One council member may have to staff and attend multiple community boards. In some cases, multiple council offices are devoting staff time and resources to the same community board, while other council members are forced to divide their attention among 2 or 3 different boards. As someone who spends a great deal of time at community board meetings, I can assure you that New Yorkers shouldn't need a flow chart to figure out who represents them. I urge the commission to consider making community district boundaries coterminous with city council district boundaries. When representation boundaries align, accountability becomes clearer. Residents know exactly who represents them. Community boards know exactly who their elected partners are. Council offices can deploy staff more efficiently. Government agencies have clearer points of contact, and government becomes easier for ordinary people to navigate. Today, government often asks New Yorkers to navigate a maze of overlapping jurisdictions, competing responsibilities, and unclear lines of authority. I think we can do better. Government works best when every resident knows who represents them, who appointed them, and who to hold accountable when things go wrong. That's why I believe these 2 reforms are worth pursuing. Shared appointment authority for community boards would strengthen democratic accountability, and aligning community districts with the council districts would improve efficiency, reduce duplication, and make government easier for residents to navigate. Good government isn't about creating more layers, it's about creating clearer lines. The best reforms are often the simplest ones. Make representation more accountable, make government easier to navigate. Those are goals that I think should unite New Yorkers regardless of ideology, borough, or political party. Thank you so much for your time, for your service, for trotting out here in the rain, and for your consideration of these proposals.
Council member, thank you so much for the clarity of your recommendations. There are many of us here who have served in borough president offices and also in the city council. And we recognize that you are exactly right about the redundancies and the challenge we have about shared democratic voices in those spaces. So I think that this is worthy of interrogation. Councilmember, am I correct in assuming that we will see you in person tomorrow evening in Staten
Wild,
Island?
wild horses could not stop me from being in
Excellent.
Staten Island with you tomorrow. And I am looking forward to greeting all of you in person and welcoming you to the Borough of Parks.
Judging from the weather reports, it might take wild horses to get us all there. Councilman, thank you so much. And because we will see you tomorrow, I will not ask commissioners to pose questions to you tonight, and we'll engage then. Really appreciate this contribution.
Thank you very much. Good luck with your work.
Thank you. Let's get to our first experts. I'd like to call Michelle Craven.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon, members of the Charter Review Commission. My name is Michelle Craven, and I am the Associate Deputy Commissioner of Cityscape and Franchises at the New York City Department of Transportation. It is my privilege to testify before you today on the subject of revocable consent reform for all revocable consent applications in general, as well as outdoor dining more specifically. I've overseen revocable consent since I began working at DOT nearly 14 years ago. I've also worked on the outdoor dining program since the inception of the emergency program in 2020, and I've overseen the program since 2021. Revocable consents grant an entity the right to construct and maintain certain structures on, over, or under the inalienable property of the city, including streets and sidewalks. Revocable consents authorize a wide range of structures, from building improvements like stoops and ADA ramps, to sidewalk improvements such as planters, benches, and security bollards, to utility infrastructure such as pipes and electrical conduits and even electrical transmission lines, to outdoor dining setups. Revocable consents serve a useful role in allowing private entities to use public property for worthwhile purposes. Today, I would like to focus on two sections of the Charter that add delays, costs, and complexity to revocable consent reviews. First, Charter 371 requires DOT to hold a public hearing on all revocable consent applications, regardless of the scale of the proposed structure. Second, Charter 364E carves out revocable consents for sidewalk cafes by subjecting them to a review process outlined in the city's administrative code rather than the revocable consent requirements set forth in the Charter. As a result, there are separate applications and separate review processes for sidewalk and revocable consent applications, even when a single restaurant is applying for both. Let's start with the public hearing requirement. Charter 371 requires DOT to hold a public hearing for all revocable consent applications, including applications for sidewalk or for roadway cafes. Public hearings are required less frequently for sidewalk cafes due to their distinct application process.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Can I ask you to move the microphone a little closer?
Closer.
Yes.
Is that better?
That's so much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
The public hearing process is both expensive and time consuming, and it has almost no effect on the revocable consent reviews. Prior to the hearing, DOT must publish a notice of public hearing in the city record for 15 consecutive days, as well as twice in one or multiple local newspapers. Notices to the city record must be submitted a week before publication begins, so noticing the hearing automatically adds a month to an already lengthy review time. Moreover, although the city record is free, the newspaper ads are quite expensive, and the Charter requires the applicant to pay for these advertising costs. DOT arranges for publication of the public hearing notices and batches 10 or 12 revocable consent applications per hearing to reduce costs. But even so, each agenda item can cost over $1,000. In some cases, these ad fees are significantly higher than the annual revocable consent fees for the applicant's ongoing use of city property, and they are incredibly burdensome on homeowners and small businesses. The ad requirements stem from an earlier time when print media was still thriving. Nowadays, it is reasonable to wonder whether classified ads are an effective way to communicate hearing information to public stakeholders. In contrast to the costs, the associated benefits of the public hearings are minimal. For revocable consents unrelated to the outdoor dining program, public hearings typically receive 1 to 5 total attendees for a hearing agenda of a dozen items. Those attendees are almost always representatives from the applicant team as opposed to independent stakeholders. It is exceedingly rare to receive any public comments at these hearings. The relevant community board, borough president, and council member have all had a chance to review the proposal before the public hearing occurs, so it is redundant. For outdoor dining applications, where public hearings are required for all roadway applications, but only some sidewalk applications, 1 or 2 community members may attend to comment on a handful of agenda items, but approximately 90% of applications receive no comments whatsoever. In recent months, attendance at public hearings for outdoor dining applications has been minimal. Overall, the public hearing requirement does little more than add red tape and financial burdens to an already cumbersome process. Next, I'd like to turn to Charter 364 and the carve-out for sidewalk cafes. Before I explain the implications of the carve-out, I would like to very briefly describe the review processes for roadway and sidewalk cafe applications, which are dictated by the charter and the city's administrative code. Both review processes are quite lengthy. This flowchart is a slightly simplified summary of the review process for roadway cafe applications. As you can see, once an applicant submits a complete and accurate application and site plan to DOT, the application goes to the relevant community board and council member for review and comment. The application is then heard at a DOT public hearing as discussed above. Assuming all goes well, the applicant submits insurance paperwork and pays the annual fee, and the parties execute a revocable consent agreement. The Mayor's Office of Contract Services, or MOCS, then reviews and signs the agreement before DOT submits the agreement to the Comptroller's Office for registration. After the agreement is registered, DOT issues a roadway cafe license to the applicant. This process takes several months at a minimum. The sidewalk cafe review process, which is shown on the next slide, is even longer. After the applicant submits a complete and accurate application and site plan to DOT, the application goes to the relevant community board, which may vote to approve or deny the application. Depending on the result of the community board review, DOT may be required to hold a public hearing on the application. DOT then submits the application to the relevant council member. The council member may then decide to call up the application for a full council vote. If the council does not deny the application, the rest of the process mirrors the roadway cafe review process. There are separate review processes for sidewalk and roadway cafe applications because of Charter 364E, which reads, notwithstanding any provision of this charter or the administrative code, revocable consents to construct and operate sidewalk cafes shall be reviewed pursuant to sections 19-160 through 19-160.6 of the administrative code. Although the ad code citations have changed since the days when the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection managed the city sidewalk cafe program, the review process is substantially the same, with the same stakeholders reviewing each application. Because there's no carve out for roadway cafes, they are subject to the charter requirements as well as separate additional requirements of the administrative code. As a result, sidewalk and roadway cafes follow two separate review paths, which is an incredibly confusing, expensive, and administratively burdensome scheme for applicants. It also requires restaurants to duplicate efforts if they want both sidewalk and roadway dining. Applicants who want to apply for sidewalk and roadway cafes at the same property must file two separate applications with two separate site plans and then go through two separate review processes. Applicants who would like both sidewalk and roadway cafes must also pay two license fees instead of one, so they pay an extra $1,050. The community board must review both applications, although they have more time to review sidewalk applications. One restaurant sidewalk and roadway applications can be heard at different public hearings, and the applicants would be required to pay two public hearing advertising fees. Applicants must duplicate efforts at all stages of the review process, which adds delays and administrative hurdles to their license approvals. 2 checks, 2 agreements, 2 licenses, 2 registrations with the comptroller. We've heard from small businesses that having 2 separate processes is overly complicated and more expensive for applicants than it needs to be. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so very much, Michelle. I think that this testimony ought to go viral. That is a process
Which it
that's,
would.
oh my God, that's more complicated than the second law of thermonuclear dynamics. That is, one can begin to understand the frustrations of small businesses where you have to run through that kind of a thicket of bureaucracy just to get a very, very simple thing done.
Oh, absolutely.
Astonishing. I'd like to invite questions for the Associate Deputy Commissioner from our panel. Please, if we could start at the end and make our way over.
I appreciate the testimony. So, I'm always a big proponent of opening up.
I think you need the microphone closer.
I'm always a big proponent of opening up government, right? And making sure that we're letting folks know what's happening and not take away transparencies. So I get your points regarding the print media is not what it used to be. So what would you say to those folks who see this as you're actually taking away their ability to see these like applications in this process? I mean, is there another alternative method as to which they could find out about these, these applications?
So every revocable consent application goes to the community board, the council member, and the borough president. So I do think we're sort of sharing that information pretty widely. I think if there was a greater concern, if we could, publish something on our website, we could make something available without having to go through the public hearing. People could send us comments if they want, or they could go to their community boards or their elected officials. If keeping the hearing is really important, I would think just getting rid of the print ads, which is the expense, would be very valuable because it is running in the city record. And the city record is free. It's available to everyone. And when people ask us about hearings, we usually direct them to the city record because it's the easiest place to find everything. And maybe I wouldn't run it for 3 weeks because that seems like overkill, but I think there are adjustments that could be made there without making the applicants pay these hefty ad fees that really, aren't serving a purpose as far as we can tell.
And that makes sense. My second question is, and I just want to make sure I get this right. The roadway dining, sidewalk dining, these are sheds, but
Well, we don't allow sheds anymore.
okay, but potentially having dining both on the sidewalk and in the street.
Right.
So it could be the same restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
So to the customer, there's no really, it's one entity,
Right.
but the process is actually two separate.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Please, Ruth.
So I want to thank you very much for your testimony. I could not agree more with the notion that we should not put paid public notices in places where nobody reads them and drives small business people crazy. And I could not agree more that if you're looking for both sidewalk and roadway, you should be able to combine your applications. What I want to say is, living in an area in which these permits are extensively used, there are real challenges to the community and to neighbors and to visitors. So I want to have us end up with a process that is not crazy, but that is a process and allows for some public notice and public input. So I'm going to ask the commission and staff and you, this is a good review of things that are crazy, but I would like to see what a streamlined process would look like and where community voices could be heard. I'm also going to take 1 minute, Mr. Chairman, for public advertising. We talk here about what happens in other cities. I would just draw to the attention of these agencies in the city of New York that in the city of Seattle, which builds a lot, if you go past an area like, let's say, a roadway space or an empty lot, the city of Seattle puts up a sign and says, this is what is proposed. This is the agency or the private developer who proposes it. This is what to do if you want to have your voice heard. It could not be simpler, and we seem incapable of doing it.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions, please, Marika.
So thank you very much for this testimony, and find it incredibly interesting as somebody who thought that they had a sense of what a lot of this was, just how many additional steps and distinct different pieces folks thought were one big process. I think building on what Ruth said, one note is that maybe a couple decades ago in housing, one of the changes that happened was an intentional posting around what the project was that was coming for any project that has city funding. So a sense like visually as you walk by, here is what is planned, here is the general timeline of what is planned, here is who you should contact, right? Thinking about the fact that the people who are most likely with comments are folks who are interacting with the physical space that's going to have the outdoor dining or the sidewalk cafes. The other piece is absolutely on thinking about how to make this more efficient and streamlining, but also making sure that some of the businesses that require foot traffic and turnover have some way to give input and feedback in the process, which is something we've heard in some of our commercial corridors of like, what happens when you end up with a block that has 7 sidewalk cafes or, 7 roadway dinings, but I'm a barber shop or I'm a right that
Mhm.
requires like lots of coming and going and turning over. So making sure that there's still a way for them to engage and for us to make sure we're not sort of getting to past a critical tipping point and who is making the decision of when to say no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Longani, I believe that you're online and would like to make a comment or ask a question.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies for not being there in person. I just wanted to ask our witness if I own a restaurant and I want a sidewalk and a roadway permit, I'd have to go through 2 public hearings. Is that right?
Maybe you have to go through at least one for the roadway, and then for
Uh-huh.
the sidewalk, it depends how the community board review of your application goes. So you could be required to have a second one, yes.
And do they usually happen at the same hearing, or are these separate hearings? Is it like, in other words, generally speaking, 2 completely separate processes?
It is two completely separate processes. If you're lucky, they could be at the same hearing, but there is absolutely no guarantee that that would happen. Even the community board review time for the two processes is different. The community board has 40 days to review a sidewalk cafe application and 30 days to review a roadway cafe application. And typically when roadway cafe applications come in, we know they're going to need to have a public hearing. So we start the notice process as soon as we can. So it could happen earlier. We don't know if you're going to need the sidewalk cafe application right away. So it can lag.
Thank you. I believe we have one last question for you from Emma Wolf. Oh,
Thank you. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm sort of putting you on the spot. Because I know all of the commissioners are curious, and you've heard us all say we do need to account for the community concerns or some community members' concerns around some of the structures. So, coming back is, great. But do you have an idea yourself or colleagues of what you would say to the public should the changes that you want go through, what the sort of guarantees are around community engagement?
Well, I think and understand obviously that if we're talking about outdoor dining specifically, that the processes are legislated by the council. So I assume that there would be council legislation to develop whatever the new process would be. I think my concern has always been that it seems like from the start, we have not been able to create a process that makes sense because of the constraints of the city charter. And if we took those away, then we could actually ideally have a productive legislative session with the council and come up with something that makes sense and takes every sort of stakeholder into account. I mean, I would not plan to cut out the community board. I wouldn't cut out the local council member. I don't think everything needs to happen sequentially. Like, can everyone look at it at the same time and we can kind of move on from there? And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion and back and forth, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that's the goal, really. We weren't able to come up. Everyone wanted to streamline the process. Everyone said, this is going to be great. We're going to have a brand new process and it's going to make things so much easier. But we're basically stuck with what we had before, but we've made it twice as complicated.
Could I just add though, to what the deputy chair said? Would make me nervous for us to do away with all of these requirements and then say there will be a process. So I think there's a complexity here in wanting to end up with a process that is not crazy, which I agree, but that does let the communities know and lets communities and elected officials have some say. And we're in a city in which simply saying we're doing away with all of this in the charter and somebody will develop a process someday does not bode well.
But I think the charter changes that can be made are relatively simple because part of it is just this carve out for the sidewalk cafes creates this duplicative situation. That wouldn't necessarily take anything away from what's in the legislation. And then I do think there are improvements that could be made to the public hearing process, but I think there are a number of changes that could be made. And I kind of defer to the group about what's most appropriate.
great. Michelle, thank you so very much for your expert testimony. That was incredibly helpful.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to now invite the testimony of Eric Beaton, Deputy Commissioner of Transportation, Planning and Management. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
right, placement works. You can all hear okay?
We can hear you clearly.
All right, let me know if I tail off. So good afternoon. My name is Eric Beaton, and I'm Deputy Commissioner for Transportation Planning and Management at the New York City Department of Transportation. I'm glad to be here to talk about the major transportation projects laws. New York City's streets are ever changing, and we have an urgent responsibility to make our streets work better for New Yorkers. The MTA's buses are the slowest in the nation, and while also having the highest ridership, leaving residents beyond the reach of the subway system with less access to jobs, education, and other services. Our public realm supports a vibrant economy, as research has shown that a better streetscape leads to benefits for small businesses. And while we have made great progress, still far too many New Yorkers are killed or seriously injured on our roads. We know what works. The agency has over 100 street projects in a given year, and we often see reductions in injuries of 40% or more with our projects. Work we do equitably all over the city, driven by the data. Yet, some of these street redesign initiatives are subject to mandated delays that slow down the projects, and in so doing, risk lives and injuries. The rules governing major transportation projects, that is, any project that alters 1,000 consecutive feet or 4 or more consecutive blocks, whichever is less, or any bike lane regardless of length, is subject to bureaucratic interagency notification requirements to 4 separate agencies, consultation with the affected firehouse, and certifications. Projects involving a bike lane are subject to additional notice requirements, which can add up to 75 days to any given project. When a project is an MTP, the law requires a set of internal communications where DOT must formally send projects to other city agencies, including NYPD, FDNY, SBS, and the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities. FDNY then has a further obligation to consult on the project with any specific affected firehouses and to provide back to DOT detail on which firehouses were consulted, the feedback from the project review, the method by which the affected firehouses provided feedback, and the date the feedback was provided. DOT must then include a certification of this correspondence occurring as part of the next notification steps. As you can see, this is an extraordinarily detailed process between mayoral agencies mandated by the local law. While the law does not specifically require any timeline for this step, the process typically takes between 1 and 2 months, sometimes requiring extra back and forth steps if not every element noted previously is properly recorded. Once the mandated internal agency coordination is complete, DOT must then send copies of the certification and notice of the project to the affected council member, senator, assembly member, and community board. At this point, with an exception for summertime bike lane projects that I'll come back to, the elected officials have 10 days to provide comments, and the community boards have 10 days to submit comments and/or request a presentation. If the community board requests a presentation, DOT must present within 30 days and then must forward the presentation to elected officials within 3 days of that date. DOT then must take 7 days to consider comments and recommendations, and then must send to all parties either an amended plan or notice that it will proceed with the original plan. If the MTP contains a bike lane and notice is provided between June 20 and August 20, then elected officials have 20 days to provide comments, community boards have 20 days to request the presentation, and then 45 days to schedule that presentation with DOT. All in all, this can take nearly 2 months for any MTP and nearly 3 months for bike projects given notice over the summer. For reference, our typical construction season usually covers about 5.5 months, from late April to early October. It is important to note that all of these steps have to happen after a project has already been substantially planned, because otherwise there would not be a project with sufficient detail to review. So DOT will always have done a substantial amount of engagement prior to this point in the process. We go door to door with resident and business surveys. We have street ambassadors that engage New Yorkers in over 10 languages at bus stops and community gathering places. And we use digital tools, each of which gets feedback from different stakeholders as we do our planning work. The MTP steps then need to be completed prior to project implementation, which creates a gap in time after the detailed outreach and planning has finished and before the improvements can be made on the streets. One specific example of this delay can be seen with the Baychester Avenue School Safety Project, which was sought by parents and school administrators who wanted children to have safer routes to school after over a dozen children were injured along the corridor. The project makes a number of street design improvements, including lane reconfiguration to add parking spaces and improve school loading, extending school loading zones, and improving bus stop accessibility. The project is aimed at enhancing safety for residents and the 5,800 K-12 students in the area. Yet, because this redesign is considered a major transportation project and therefore required to follow the extensive steps detailed above, full implementation was delayed by nearly a year as the notification timelines pushed the project past the time of year when construction would be possible. While thankfully no one was killed here, we all know that any delay to safety work only invites preventable tragedies. Thank you all for your consideration and attention on street improvement projects.
Thank you so very much, Eric. Questions from our commissioners? Please, Kathy.
Just a point of clarification, you said it's in the law. Did you mean it's in the law or in the chart?
It's in local city council law.
So nothing that you referenced is in the chart.
Correct. The laws, I'm talking about laws here. The idea would be that the charter commission could look at ways to streamline this process because it's very difficult to do through the normal political process.
To override the law.
Yes.
Please.
Do you have any particular recommendations for that streamlining?
So my recommendations would be twofold, and you know I'm not the legal charter expert, so these are more directional. But first, I would look carefully at what projects are really subject to this. You know, a project that redesigns miles and miles of a Manhattan Avenue is subject to the same process as adding a bike lane on one block of a street outside Manhattan, right? There's an imbalance in what's required for different types of projects. So I would think carefully about whether there's a much smaller universe that needs the significantly enhanced notification procedures. And then I would look at the lengths of time and see if there's a way to incorporate this into the development of the project. Because having all these requirements only once a project is finished does nothing but add delay. And I think that if you know we all care deeply about outreach, right? Public input is an important part of what we do, but just adding a complicated set of requirements at the end is not really making the projects better. And in fact, has invited quite a large amount of litigation over whether each of the day requirements and each of the certifications are being done correctly. So I think this is an example where just simplification would be much better.
Other questions, comments, commissioners? Please, Susan.
Thank you for this. I was wondering if there's particular projects, like how do we carve out what's not included? Like, I think I hear you saying that certain projects shouldn't be put up to the same level of review as a major road construction. I guess we'd love to hear clarification. Like, should all bike lanes, for example, or traffic calming type projects or something like that be excluded? Because we do need to clarify in any kind of proposals we send to voters. And then also, are you suggesting the DOT consult with fewer other agencies? And if so, we'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So to address the second point first, like no, like those four agencies that we talk to are incredibly important, and we do that. We often do it much earlier in the process because we don't want to show up at the community board with a project that doesn't work for a fire truck turning radius, right? We have a detailed set of procedures where we review projects with the fire department. We have a set of requirements from the fire department that our professional engineers ensure are included in every project before they're willing to sign a plan. Right? We have a very detailed system, but the current situation involves many multiple steps that have to be specifically certified. And you can imagine, like the fire department's responsibility isn't and really shouldn't be having to know exactly what form the feedback was provided in. Was it an email? Was it a phone call? Was it a meeting to send back to DOT? And to know that if that certification isn't provided, that someone can sue us and potentially have projects sent back to start again because they didn't report every step. So we absolutely want that input. And similarly, we absolutely want public input. We have put a tremendous amount of effort into expanding how and when and the number of times that we engage with New Yorkers about projects. So I can't speak to all of the thinking when the law may have been first introduced, but I think there's some broad agreement that we do a tremendous amount of outreach on projects now. And I think it would be a good conversation about both the type of notification and the length for specific projects. The extremes are easy, right? Like, should I one block bike lane that doesn't take any moving or parking lanes have to have this 2 to 3 month review notification process? Probably not. But for a higher level of project, something might be appropriate. From where I sit, right? Like, I would rather be able to implement safety projects as quickly as possible, right? We have an urgent need. There's over 200 New Yorkers that are killed on our streets every year. But I recognize that there's some interplay with the proper notification, particularly for larger types of projects. So I think it's a good conversation, and I don't have a specific taxonomy here.
So we'll just say to be continued on that score, Eric. So thank you so very much for your testimony and the care with which you took up the questions from this panel. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the
Thank
time.
you. Thank you. We are now going to open this hearing to the general public. And of course, as I explained at the very top, we intend to front load questions, interventions, recommendations about that are focused on public spaces and that are charter specific. I'd like to invite the testimony, and I expect to call those who are testifying up in panels of 2, with the exception of this first person, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they require the partnership of a translator. Second panel? Okay, thank you. I take that back. Anne-Marie Gray and Ligia Gualpa. Ligia, please forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. I have no phonetic help, so I'm really sorry.
You want to go to? No. Okay, great. Yeah, well, good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ligia Hualpa. I'm the executive director of the Workers' Justice Project, which is a community-based organization that organizes workers. And I'm here particularly to speak about the urgent need to ensure that our public spaces also serve workers. Whose workplaces happens to be our streets. New York City is the home of 80,000 app delivery workers who keep our city moving every day. They deliver food, medicine, essential goods to every neighborhood in every weather conditions. While our city depends on their labor, our streets and public spaces are not designed to support their work. The workers who we rely on them every day. Delivery workers are navigating dangerous streets without enough protected bike lanes, without safe places to park their bikes, without a dignified space to rest, eat, charge their e-bikes, or simply wait for deliveries. New York City is also home to approximately 20,000 day laborers who gather on the street corners looking for work, supporting construction sites, and building our city to sustain the city of New York. For thousands of workers, public spaces have become their workplaces, but there is a need to treat public spaces and our streets also as a workplace of thousands of workers. And the reason I'm here today is to testify to ask the city of New York to reconsider about how we design public spaces to also serve New Yorkers. Thinking how we transform unused public spaces. For instance, more delivery workers are looking for delivery zones where they can wait for work or where to park. And here in the city of New York, everybody is treating delivery workers as a safety hazard or a public hazard without rethinking that the real problem that our city is experiencing is that our streets haven't really been designed to readapt the new reality of our streets. And for instance, we recently launched the Liberista Hub, which, by the way, took us 5 long years to finally become a reality because of a long bureaucratic process, for long public hearings, where the public even had doubts about whether the Liberista Hub could be considered a dignified and the right space for delivery workers. And we're here to say the Liberista Hubs are the solution, are the model to look at for what public safety solutions should look like, and how we can transform on-use public spaces to serve workers who need a dignified infrastructure to rest, to charge their batteries, to be able to access to basic resources. Delivery workers have the knowledge and the experience to help redesign our streets and our public spaces. Leaders like Antonio, who will be speaking later today, and thousands of other delivery workers know these streets better than anyone, understands the challenges that our streets are experiencing, have just creative ideas about how we can make sure that public spaces also serve them. The Workers' Justice Project looks forward to partnering with the City of New York to create more Deliverista hubs across the city to make sure that we can deliver delivery zones to address the concerns of every neighborhood who complains about too many bikes parking in a neighborhood. We can deliver more charging stations, e-bike parking for delivery workers, in making sure that we ensure that the City of New York and our streets is also adapted for workers whose workplace happens to be the streets of the City of New York.
Thank you. Can you please stay with us? Oh, there's only one mic there. Apologies. Please, Anne Marie.
Yes. Good evening. I'm Anne Marie Gray, Executive Director of Open New York, a statewide grassroots advocacy group that advocates for abundant homes and lower rents. Thanks for having me tonight. We're excited about Mamdani administration taking a top to bottom look at streamlining procedures to expedite equitable development, or the SPEED task force report, and a range of strategies in the block by block housing plan to build more homes. And we really applaud the complementary intentions of this commission and urge you to prioritize measures that will speed up the process of building homes of all kinds to make New York City fairer and more affordable. High housing costs and lack of options are driving New Yorkers out of the city. Housing growth has been uneven and inequitable across the 5 boroughs. This commission can build on the 2025 Charter Commission's measures overwhelmingly voted into law by New Yorkers last November, which are already speeding up the delivery of affordable housing. So our recommendations are focused on 2 complementary areas of reform: permitting and building code reform, and a closer look at the landmarking process. So the SPEED report and frankly, my testimony before the last Charter Review Commission highlighted how disparate permitting processes across over half a dozen city agencies slow down housing production, leading to increased construction costs that are passed along to tenants. So we support efforts to implement the SPEED task force permitting reform recommendations and give the Department of Buildings power to make changes to the building code via rulemaking. Our complex building code reflects centuries of layered on requirements, some of which find their origins in the days of horse-drawn fire engines, well before inventions like the fire extinguisher or modern sprinkler systems. So DOB co-administration of the building code can allow for a comprehensive review by subject matter experts without sacrificing the city council's ability to make needed changes via legislation. And secondly, Open New York is once again calling for reforms to the Landmarks Preservation Commission process. In a historic housing crisis, we really must take a more well-rounded view of neighborhood character. And while buildings themselves are a really crucial part of the fabric of our neighborhoods, so too are the New Yorkers that live in them. Today, we're seeing townhome conversions gobble up multifamily buildings in affluent areas like the West Village, displacing few working New Yorkers that can remain in these areas thus far, and really fundamentally changing the neighborhood's character, absent LPC input. So we want LPC to consider our historically low 1.4% vacancy rate in their applications, in particular projects that will result in a net loss of housing units, and work with City Planning Commission to analyze the effects of proposed historic districts on future housing opportunity sites. And we have a couple examples of where this is happening. So in general, we're really eager to work with the commission and explore these ideas and frankly, any other reforms that help speed up desperately needed housing for New Yorkers.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. Can we assume that you have detailed those examples in the testimony that you're submitting to the commission?
Yes, we're planning on submitting some further details with examples.
Great. Thank you so much. Ligia, just a quick question for me before I turn it to the panel. Can you please help me to understand why it took 5 years for the creation of the hub? You can just take you can
Oh. Thank you. Well, I think one of the biggest challenge has been navigating the city bureaucracy, especially when there is interagency coordination to delivering a Deliverista hub, especially when we were using landmark spaces in trying to put e-bike charging. There needs to be a interagency coordination between landmarks, between DOT, between parks, between FDNY, who now regulates the e-bike charging. And often the biggest challenge is the lack of coordination and information, but also one of the biggest challenges in the city of New York that is experiencing is actually the fact that e-bike charging stations need to be developed up to based on FDNY guidelines. And a lot of those guidelines depends on that in order e-bike charging needs to be tested in a specific way. And often that mechanism of testing the e-bike charging doesn't exist yet. So we have all these new policies and regulations on e-bike charging stations, on how infrastructure needs to be developed. And often those guidelines are too extreme to the fact that we cannot adapt and develop these e-micromobility devices in a more faster way. And also the I think, public pushback on Deliverista hubs, which has been a big controversy in every neighborhood, pushing back about whether Deliveristas should access to public spaces and whether public spaces should be giving to also workers.
Thank you. Commissioners, Ruth, please.
Yeah, I don't think there's any answer to this, but I'm very appreciative of the need to think about charging stations and ways and places for the universe of delivery people to have some access to a reasonable life on their jobs. But I'm also concerned about the fact that many of the companies that they work for take up huge amounts of public space and are doing their private business on city streets and parking lots. That's then where the delivery people have to go, but it becomes their work assignment space in ways that I think I'm not asking you really to have testimony on that, but I'm just saying that sympathy for the delivery workers does not extend in my mind to sympathy for the companies that are parking in my neighborhood, literally taking up 2 lanes of traffic for half a block so that they can provide packages and messages to the delivery people who line up there. The delivery people have no place else to go but there, but I'm not sure that that all of these companies should be doing business on city streets and public spaces. It's really not a question, it's a comment, but
you're welcome to respond.
Well, I just want to, I think it's important to recognize, I mean, the city of New York, I understand that corporations are profiting out of the labor of workers, but also New Yorkers are benefiting from the labor of 80,000 app delivery workers who continue to work in the city of New York. And the reason I think about this is because it's not just about parking, but it's also about how they're utilizing public spaces in order to rest, to have a dignified. For instance, and I have to share this, and I don't know if Gustavo is gonna during the pandemic, most workers were struggling to find a space where to have lunch, and often when they found a public space that was closed door during the wintertime, they were often kicked out of public private spaces because they were told that they couldn't be in those spaces because it was not a good looking image for the rest of the public. So the reason I say this is because we also have to rethink about how we share public space with workers, and yes, holding corporations accountable. And I think they do have to pay their fair share to make sure that when we're redesigning our city streets, that actually corporations are putting money into it. But I want to kind of keep thinking about that. These are workers who are using our streets, who are New Yorkers, who are also reclaiming back that their streets should also belong to them.
Additional questions, please.
Maybe not a question, but a comment. I feel like I've seen at a couple of the hearings people coming and looking for solutions in the charter when I've actually heard the solutions coming from the people who are testifying. And I feel like especially on like infrastructure around e-bikes, and we hear about the lack of infrastructure for electric vehicles. Like I feel like I need you and you to talk. Like Worker Justice Project and the DOT really need to get together and come up with a lot of these solutions, dealing with the infrastructure that, quite frankly, doesn't exist currently, because we didn't anticipate this industry really existing, quite frankly, even 5 years ago. So and there's a lot of other folks in there, but I need to see a business card exchange and a conversation had. But also was wondering if you can expand a little bit. I feel like we see it a lot in the news. I live near Fulton Street, so I see a lot of delivery workers near like the masjid on Fulton and Bedford there. And oftentimes they're being harassed by police officers, or like day laborers by Home Depot being open to ICE attacks. I was wondering if you can expand a little bit more on just the perils and some of the other issues that folks are dealing with because we don't provide public space for them.
Yeah. So speaking about the harassment, especially by the NYPD, well, first of all, we're grateful that we have a mayor who eliminated the criminal summons, which was a big issue. But that hasn't really eliminated by the fact that deliveristas are still getting civil summonses for parking, often in the sidewalk. And I just have to say, a lot of deliveristas don't want to park in the sidewalk, but often when they cannot find the area to park or wait, they have no other option, often. And also, one of the biggest issues in the industry, especially now, thank you for highlighting, is that delivery companies have become more aggressive with delivery workers. Since we passed minimum pay, and since now they have to pay workers for the time that they're actually working, they're putting more pressure on workers to deliver faster. Which that means that if a deliverista doesn't deliver in the estimated time that AI, which is being used to predetermine, a worker gets fired. And often workers find themselves trying to navigate the streets without a protected bike lane, or an area where often even by the app is being asked to take the wrong lane in order to get there faster. And often workers take those risks to avoid getting fired. And one of the biggest issues that we're also experiencing, especially in Brooklyn, in areas, is that there has been a number of ICE raids, particularly targeting app delivery workers and day laborers. Park Slope was one of them, where we had a huge number of members who were actually deported and were caught by ICE. And and also we have to think that these delivery workers and day laborers are the ones who are exposed most to not only police harassment, ICE raids, and other public safety issues. 60% of delivery workers in our last report reported that they were getting injured. About 12 died last year. So, public safety and street safety, it is the biggest priority for delivery workers, not just for the public.
We have one more question from the panel.
I just want to say thanks to both of you. I have a lot of respect and admiration for the both of you. I appreciate your testimony in reimagining the public realm and the streets, because I think commercial loading zones, as we have them, are a safe comparison to actually a deliverista hub. And in fact, the deliverista hub that you mentioned in your testimony took an underutilized and in fact closed newsstand to provide some sort of relief for these delivery workers. And they're providing essentially a public good, a service. And If we have these private trucks parked in the commercial loading zone, then why not have a private bike, so to speak, in a safe place where people could take some refuge? That's not my question, though. I just want to say I know who you are and what you're doing, and I support it. And Anne Marie, I wanted to ask you if there was anything that you weren't able to cover in your testimony related to recommendations for housing. I know Open New York has done incredible work around government efficiency in the abundance and pro-growth agenda, and just wanted to ask if there was anything that you didn't get to cover. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think the main thing is we were really active in advocating for the ballot measures that did pass last year that came out of last year's Charter Commission. So actually this year, I think, those are just going into effect. We're really following how well they're working. And these are actually some recommendations that were on the cutting room floor from that process of really focusing on permitting and building code reform, which is already in line with a lot of priorities of this administration. I think is something that hasn't gotten quite enough attention. And again, I think taking a good look at the landmark process. So we're going to submit some even further detailed stuff and I'll happy to talk more, but I think there are a couple themes here that can really help speed up housing that are complementary to a lot of other things going on.
Chair, can I just thank you to both of you. Just one thing for you, Anne Marie, is would love to get some feedback in your testimony around conversations with landmarks or some folks in that space. I know there's been 15 plus years worth of work to really push Landmarks Commission to be thinking about cultural landmarks and different cultural and historical understandings. So thinking about if there's a push to prioritize housing, making sure that it's not now working against long-term work around really getting landmarks to think about more diversity and cultural histories in how they're using landmarks.
Thank you. We're going to have to move on now. Really appreciate this testimony and your daily advocacy. I'd like to invite Antonio Martinez Solis to testify, and Antonio will need to be joined by a translator.
Ok, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Antonio Solís.
Good afternoon. My name is Antonio Solis.
Soy cofundador de los Deliveristas Unidos y de Workers Justice Project.
I am the co-founder.
Can I ask you to hold 1 second? We'll give you a second mic to make it a little easier on you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Gracias por la oportunidad de testificar sobre los espacios públicos.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify about the public spaces
Y lo que significan para los 80,000 deliveristas
and the meaning that it has for the 80,000 deliveries people.
que cada semana realizamos 2.7 millones de entregas de comida.
That per week we perform 2.77 millions of deliveries of food delivery.
Medicinas y despensas en toda la ciudad.
Medicines and all kind of staples around the city.
Somos 80,000 trabajadores que mantenemos a la ciudad de Nueva York.
We are 80,000 workers that we keep New York City moving.
Casi el 70% de nosotros realizamos
Almost 70% of us perform our deliveries
en bicicletas eléctricas o motocicletas.
in electric bikes or scooters.
La realidad es que las calles se han convertido en nuestro lugar de trabajo.
In reality, the streets has become our place of work.
Pero todos los días enfrentamos peligros debido a la falta de infraestructura segura.
But every day we encounter and we face danger due to the very lack of safe infrastructure.
la falta de ciclovías y la falta de espacios donde podemos estacionar nuestras bicicletas o simplemente tomar un descanso digno.
The lack of bicycle lanes and the lack of spaces where we can take or park to take a dignifying break.
Los parques se han convertido en nuestros comederos y lugares de descanso.
The parks have become our eating spaces and our places to take a break.
Cualquier espacio donde podamos refugiarnos, entrega por entrega, y convierte en nuestro lugar de trabajo.
In each space that we can take shelter between deliveries, it becomes our place of work.
Pero la verdad es que ni las calles, ni los parques, ni los pocos refugios que encontramos fueron creados pensando en los trabajadores como nosotros.
The truth is that neither the streets, the parks, and the very little shelters we have encountered, they were in reality created thinking of our workers and ourselves.
Por eso hemos luchado para crear nuestros propios espacios como el Deliverista Hub.
This is why we have created our own space called the Deliverista Hub.
Gracias a la colaboración y el compromiso del Departamento de Parques,
Thanks to the cooperation and the support of the departments of parks,
el Departamento de Transporte, el alcalde Mandani y el senador Schumer,
the Department of Transportation, Mayor Mandani, and Senator Chuck Schumer,
y todos los aliados
and all the allies
que entendieron los espacios públicos también deben servir a los trabajadores que mantienen esta ciudad funcionando.
and to all the people, allies, that understood that all the public spaces also must serve to our workers to keep this city running.
Permítame explicarle qué significa un Deliverista Hub para nosotros.
Allow me to explain what does it mean a deliverista hub for us.
Un Deliverista Hub
A
es un
deliverista hub
espacio liderado para trabajadores,
is a space dedicated for workers,
dirigido por deliveristas y para deliveristas,
directed for deliveries and for deliveristas,
no por corporaciones ni empresas privadas.
not for corporation or private companies.
Es un espacio donde nuestra dignidad nos respalda,
It's a space where our dignity back us up,
donde podemos ascender a herramientas para nuestro trabajo,
where we could have access to tools for our work,
conocer nuestros derechos,
to know our rights,
organizarnos y seguir construyendo poder colectivo.
organizing, and to have the power to build collective power.
And I'm going to interrupt at that point because we're at time, Antonio. We doubled the time to accommodate for the translation, but I believe that the panel has absorbed the crux of your testimony, and I'm also assuming that you will submit written testimony as well.
Pienso que vamos a recortarlo un poquito aquí por la falta de tiempo. Pienso que este concilio ha absorbido la información que usted ha querido dejar.
Okay.
I'd like to see if there are any questions from
Quiero ver si
panel
alguno
for
de los
Antonio.
panelistas tienen preguntas.
No.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Support. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for the support. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to turn to testimony from two online participants, Ashley Graber and Sumana Harihaswawa. Ashley? Ashley, can you hear us? Is that her? If Ashley's not on the line,
Hi.
or if Ashley can't, there
I
you are.
just got the ability to unmute myself. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, so I can just jump in.
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. So good evening. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ashley Graber. I co-own Cool Hand Movers with my husband, Matt Graber. We're a Brooklyn-based business, and we're licensed movers in New York City and New York State. I'm here to raise the issue of how the city handles parking fines for small local trucking businesses like ours. It's rare to be able to find legal parking within a reasonable distance of locations on a move. And while we always run the smallest vehicles possible for a job and prioritize finding a legal parking space, everybody knows what it's like to park in NYC, and trying to park a 20-foot truck is that much more difficult. And so we are ticketed. As everyone else is. The costs, however, do mount for a company like ours. Just in the course of doing business, with a fleet of just 3 vehicles, we do spend tens of thousands of dollars a year on unavoidable parking tickets. The city does recognize that these tickets are unavoidable, but they then treat it as a reliable revenue stream through the commercial abatement program, in which you sign up to pay a stipulated fine instead of the full fine, and in turn give up your right to fight parking tickets. Under Mayor Adams, those stipulated fines actually increased, some of them doubled, and are very close to the value of the ticket itself. We also have the option to forego the commercial abatement program and to contest tickets. Many are dismissible if we can show that we were in the process of providing an expeditious delivery service. However, that standard is applied very unevenly, and very similar tickets on very similar moves can yield either a guilty or not guilty result on the ticket. This cost is essentially, it's definitely passed on to customers, to New Yorkers who have no choice but to hire a moving company, to moving companies that were deemed essential businesses at the start of the pandemic. And the costs just mount. So I don't have a solution for this. We know that parking is a major issue in the city. We want to park in safe and legal ways. And the fine schedules that we have are not the answer for small businesses like ours. So I'm hoping that this committee can help facilitate some sort of cross-agency meeting, some sort of gathering of small trucking, local trucking businesses like ours to discuss how we can approach this so that we can provide safe solutions for parking without passing on totally unavoidable costs to small New York City businesses.
Thank you, Ashley. Please stay on the line with us. I'm going to turn to Sumana, and then the panel will take up questions and comments for both of you. Sumana.
Hello, Commission. Thank you so much for having all of us here. I'd like to speak to you very briefly about the most exciting section of the city charter, Chapter 13, procurement. Come on, we were all on the edge of our seat for it, right? I work in software, and I know that in software, as with so many other endeavors, working collectively can allow us to lower costs and increase efficiency. And in software, it's more efficient if various localities, various municipalities can work together jointly on the kind of software infrastructure that all cities, all municipalities need to use. So I would love for the chapter on procurement to follow up on, honestly, years of recommendations to improve how we favor open source software in procurement regulations. When we buy or build software that only a few people can ever improve or look at because it's closed source, then that reduces efficiency. It slows down our ability to make important changes and fix problems. And in some cases, it makes us beholden to vendors who don't have our best interests at heart. If we have rules in the procurement part of the charter that says, among the many other ways that we advantage certain kinds of vendors or contracts, one of the things that we should advantage is when software solutions are open source, that we can look at the source code ourselves, we can fix things. That opens up so many more possibilities for us, not only to have some more sovereignty, so that we can run the city on our own and have better security, better efficiency, but also collaborate with other cities across America and thus lower costs and work collectively when that's in our best interest. I will follow up with some written recommendations. There are already some guidelines that we can borrow from 18F from the federal level under the previous presidential administration. There have been some various kinds of initiatives that came out of previous council members and the nonprofit Beta NYC. So I'll follow up with some of those specifics, but I just wanted to put this on your radar.
Thank you so much, Sumana. And some of us were very much on the edge of our seats. So thank you. Questions for Ashley and Sumana? Questions, comments, thoughts? There are none. Thank you both for your testimony. I am going to now switch back to the room and invite Cordell Schachter and Honda Wang to testify. Good evening. Cordell?
Good evening, Chair Gaspard, Vice Chair Wolf, Secretary Kang, and Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to address you tonight about technology. Okay, thank you. I was unable to attend your Brooklyn session. My name is Cordell Schachter. I previously served as a government chief technology officer and chief information officer in New York City and in the federal government. I currently serve as an executive in residence at the Transit Tech Lab, a collaboration of the MTA, the Partnership Fund for New York City DOT, the Port Authority, and New Jersey Transit to accelerate transportation innovation. New York City cannot deliver 21st century government with 20th century technology governance. The city charter needs an update to create a modern operating system for city technology. The update should include these 6 recommendations that belong in the charter, acknowledging technology's ubiquitous and permanent importance to efficiently providing government services by amplifying the efforts of the city's workforce. First, create a City Hall IT Chief Investment Officer and OMB project review organization to increase the value returned by major technology spending by approving, monitoring, and publicly reporting on major IT investments. Second, require a separate New York City cybersecurity agency to more efficiently and effectively defend the city from cyber threats, improve incident response, and ensure that protection of city systems, data, and critical services receives the sustained executive focus needed. Third, streamline IT hiring and workforce development by establishing a multidisciplinary board to modernize IT and all hiring, working with state authorities, labor, academia, city hall, agency leadership, and the private sector to make city hiring faster, fairer, more responsive to changing needs, and to invest in the city's current workforce. Fourth, require agencies to pilot first and purchase second. New York City's purchasing rules already allow greater use of challenge-based procurement and demonstration projects. Recognize best practices, but they haven't taken hold here. A charter requirement can make it happen. Fifth, mandate a modernization roadmap for obsolete systems using agile project delivery, also a recognized best practice, and pilot-based purchasing rather than lengthy, high-risk, specification-driven projects. And six, use automation and artificial intelligence strategically and safely to help city employees focus on higher value work while improving the speed, consistency, and accessibility of public services. By updating the charter to strengthen IT investment oversight, cybersecurity, hiring, purchasing, system modernization, and responsible automation, the Commission can help create a city government that is more efficient, secure, accountable, and responsive to New Yorkers.
Thank you, Cordell. Honda.
Good evening. I've come to testify after hearing some others talk about a need to reform our civil service system. As an ordinary city worker, I urge this Charter Revision Commission to focus its efforts elsewhere, as topics related to the civil service system are often outside of the Commission's purview, as Henry will likely remind folks on the Commission, but also because many of the proposals being brought forward are fundamentally responsibility of city management and not the city charter. Two prime examples of civil service dysfunction are the exams being too encumbering and the use of civil service titles as being too restrictive. And to these points, I would suggest that they need to be fixed and not eliminated. Things like exams being riddled with typos or illogical questions, exams being held infrequently, or agencies misusing civil service titles as catch-all titles are all within the purview of management and not within the city charter. And these things can be fixed by either management simply choosing to respect and abide by the principles of our civil service system, or our unions and our labor agreements that allow us to ensure our rights are upheld under our contracts and the civil service system. The point here that I would like to make fundamentally is that the solutions here are about management and its good faith engagement with our unions, not the city charter. Asking the Charter Commission to upheave our civil service system and eliminate guardrails because of mismanagement would be the equivalent of asking the FAA to relax its airline safety standards after a plane crash because of Boeing's mismanagement of its own production line. With regards to efficiency in hiring, our civil service system is not the main barrier to people taking up city jobs. It is the length of time it takes to hire and onboard people for a relatively low amount of pay. According to the City Council's hearings on civil service back in November, the best case scenario for someone was 14 to 15 months to hire from start to finish. Public sector jobs typically pay 10% less than the private sector, and the most severe pay disparities in sections like public health are 47% lower, according to the Columbia Mailman School of Public Health. Those seeking to change our civil service system via this Charter Revision Commission so far have only proposed changes that would strip the civil service system of its protections, where applicants would trade away their job protections for the same low compensation compared with the private sector. There will be no upside for being able to retain talent or develop our existing human capital. There's no question that we should demand more of our civil service system, but that will only come about with a change in management's culture and attitude towards civil service and a real working partnership with labor in our agreements. I would encourage the Charter Revision Commission to focus its efforts elsewhere, maybe reconsidering the role of the borough presidents, but I would suggest that you stay away from civil service for the time being, as it's not within the Charter Revision Commission's purview.
We're getting ambitious. So let's take some comments, questions from the panel. But Cordell, can I ask you to just repeat your third recommendation? I lost the details on.
Sure.
I think it was about the centralized IT purchasing.
The third was streamline IT hiring and workforce development.
If you could repeat, yeah.
And then purchasing to pilot first before purchasing was number 4.
Great. That's actually the one that I wanted to ask you about. So help me to understand, and forgive my ignorance here. Help me to understand the way. What are the current barriers to piloting, to innovation, to having to incubating projects in the current system?
So the PPB rules have been updated twice to encourage agencies to pilot or conduct what's called challenge-based acquisitions, which multiple companies then would compete to deliver something in software called a minimum viable product, a small sample of what they would do. And then the company with the best product, best value, would then move forward to deliver additional steps or phases of that. The second PPB clarification said that once you recognized the winner of that competition You do not need a formal competition. You can give more work to that winner and contracts for up to 3 years, but almost no one does it. And what happens is, especially in IT, you take a year or two to write your specifications. You go to the street, take about another year to get back with clarifications, objections, and all. You're now 3 years behind when you first asked for it. And what you're likely going to get is already obsolete.
Got it. Thank you. Please, Henry.
Thank you for your testimony, but with all the respect, there are other methodologies that we can do that. You could do that through a negotiated acquisition. You could do that through a pre-qualified, as we did during the Bloomberg years, technology.
There's something wrong with your microphone, Henry. We have to switch it.
Okay. Is that better?
No, it's not. There's something wrong with it. I can see it's dented. There's definitely something wrong with it.
Henry, you should start from the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this better?
We
Thank
can-
you, everybody.
yes.
Thank you for your testimony. What I was saying was that there are other methodologies in the procurement policy that you could use in technology and have been used for in the past, such as negotiated acquisition and pre-qualification of technology projects. But I think the task that we've been given as commissioners is what we can amend in the city charter. To, I think, Honda's point, what's on our jurisdiction here. And so I am curious because you mentioned something about the investment into technology. Does that mean like, I don't know, alternative investments into Bitcoin or some other, or do you mean, you know, the Tesla and the SpaceX and all?
No. So just to pick a number out of kind of as a hypothetical, the city spends something like $50 million a year on technology projects throughout the government. It's done in pieces, each agency proposing separately to OMB, with no one taking a long view as to what's the mayor's priorities over the next 4 years and what proposals from each of the agencies best support City Hall's priorities. And there's never going to be enough money to go around. So we're going to have to pick and choose among the various competing projects. And I was at DOT for many years. I was at OTI, the Parks Department. Each agency doesn't know that they're competing with another agency, but really there's only one pot of money. You need a central eye looking at these, and I'm going to say investments, because we're not just buying software, we're not just buying computers, we're buying digital infrastructure that a 21st century government needs to run. So think about that spending being to achieve long-term goals, not just this iPad that we're going to get rid of in a couple of years, but what systems are we building for social services to make, because we know we have issues with New Yorkers who deserve benefits all getting benefits. And we've been working for 20 years to try to centralize some of those systems, to try to improve the visibility of caseworkers while maintaining the privacy of their clients. And yet we still struggle, and we know that people aren't getting the service that they need. So we need to make greater investments in that area.
So you mean by investment, you mean the city's investment?
The taxpayers, the money the taxpayers are paying.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Great. Ruth?
Yes, I mean, that was a partial answer maybe to my question, but I just wanted to start with your first recommendation, which all of which makes sense to me. If there was a central IT person, City Hall, how would you vision it functioning to make more of this seamless and less repetitive?
So I believe there needs to be one person accountable to the mayor who is charged with having that visibility across the government, and then a reorganization of sorts within OMB so that these technology projects come in and receive the same kind of review initially before they get their first funding. And then periodically they have to come back in and show that they're delivering the results that they promised at first. We sometimes say we want to fail fast. Not every good idea is going to work. But if no one ever follows up, no agency is going to volunteer and say, hey, take my money back. This didn't work out. But yet there needs to be a formal process looking back in to see how well did you do, especially, and I'm going to come back to the challenge-based acquisitions, Mr. Garrido. If we're doing something very innovative and we put our hopes in that, let's come back quickly to make sure we're getting a phase 2 that achieves the results that we want.
Thank you, Cordell. I just wanted, I just have a point of clarification. So I know you're saying there isn't a singular person in government that's taking that holistic view. So wasn't that what was envisioned when OTI was created and the CTO position was created? Because if I remember correctly, at the time that you submit a new need, let's say to OMB, part of the process was supposed to be going to the CTO to first of all ensure that the technology or the software aligned with either the planned infrastructure for the city. So I'm just trying to figure out, how is this recommendation different from what was envisioned before?
Okay, so my submitted testimony goes into more detail on that.
Thank you.
3 minutes, I couldn't do that. But essentially, OTI is another agency among many agencies. It's a shared service agency. It doesn't have the bandwidth to be also an oversight agency to the extent that it needs to be, which is why I also recommend that we address that through and our cybersecurity threats by going back to having a separate cybersecurity agency. These things are very important. OTI does an important job. It's just too much.
Thank you.
Great. Please. Did I see a hand at the very, Rico, was that? Thank you.
I just had a clarifying question, because you mentioned cybersecurity. So where exactly, where does cybersecurity live right now within New York City government? So NYPD, where does it situate?
So centrally, the city cybersecurity office lives within OTI, reporting to the head of OTI. When the city cyber command first started out in the de Blasio administration, it was a separate organization. I was the CTO at New York City DOT at the time. It was a new thing. It worked. We got priority, both spending and attention from cyber experts without having to wait in line, as agencies, I understand, have to do now, where the cybersecurity priorities get mixed in with the other things that OTI has to do.
So what happened? When was what was the rationale behind the consolidation, and what's the impact then?
So I wasn't part of the administration. I had moved to the federal government and was the CIO of US DOT when Cyber Command was folded into OTI, which coincidentally is where it started out. And the reason why Cyber Command was broken out was we understood that we weren't doing a good enough job there.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just so Dawn and I worked in a project on this, and the Civil Service Commission rejected the city's proposal for the creation of the cybersecurity titles. She and I can tell you. So actually, the idea of the cybersecurity bifurcation came through a collaboration between DCAS and DC 37. And then once the full titles were proposed, it was an interim program. It was rejected by the state commission.
Thank you, Henry.
I just add one caveat to that, though. Since that time, the federal government has backed away from its cyber investments. So the city now needs to do more to keep New Yorkers safe. We need to revisit this question again.
Other questions, comments? Great. Thank you both for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going back to our online participants, and I'd like to call on, actually, no, that's the wrong order. We'll stay in the room. Pei Wei and Rajesh Sankat.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pei Wei. I'm the co-owner of small Thai restaurant named Zaza from the underserved Southeast Asian community. I'm also the board director member of New York City Hospitality Alliance. I'm coming here to talking about the dining out program and the open street. So I support the idea of creating the public space and get people together. But there are many challenges that we are facing as a small business restaurant owner. Uh, Outdoor dining actually large become a luxury for the well-funding restaurant in a wealthy neighborhood from my point of view, and they only can afford it for certain restaurant. Um, they can only afford the application fee, construction cost, storage expense, and legal requirement. They also have customer with a higher income that can support those investments. So I want to take my restaurant for example. We apply for the sidewalk dining permit when the program first launched, very beginning. So we pay $1,050 for the non-refundable application fee, $1,500 refundable security deposit, and the $1,200 from this little space, outdoor dining space. In total, we had to spend like a $3,700, and this is just our Queens location. So think about other location like Brooklyn or Manhattan. Other restaurant could spend more. So after waiting several months, our application was denied because our landlord's signature was not notarized. Unfortunately, our landlord was overseas at that time, so we are able to complete the whole process. So we didn't get the outdoor dining program approval. We also received the table, umbrella, and fencing from the Congresswoman, the Small Business Support Program, but we don't have the permit. Later on, we got the $500 violation fee because we leave the fence out there. And then we also got the letter said that we will face another additional $1,000 penalty if we don't remove the fence. Another restaurant owner, my neighborhood, my friend, they spend more than $7,000 in Queens on the 20 fee, architecture fee, just attend the sidewalk cafe permit, not even recruiting the roadway cafe. We only apply sidewalk cafe. So I strongly urge the commissioner to eliminate the revocable consent list requirement. Doing so, we could significantly reduce the cost and shorten the approval process for the business, small business, for several months. Some of my friends already waiting for 1 year, and us also waiting for several months and got denial. So we had to apply again. And I want to talk a little bit about the open street.
You're right at time, but I'll give you just a second to conclude.
Okay. Just the open street because we also in front of our restaurant we also had the open street, and then the stream funding was funding to a nonprofit, but we only got 1 to 3 event in our open street. We're trying to organize merchant association, but we were told by SBS like we must have $100,000 in the bank, otherwise they don't give the funding to us, which I think is injustice and not fair. So we strongly urge like you can fund into the local merchant association because we are the people who live there and have the business there. We care our community the most,
We
not
understand.
giving funding to the other nonprofit organization. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, and I'm sorry for how burdensome this has all been. Please, Rashesh.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you so much for the time. Good evening. My name is Rajesh Sandkat. I am a program strategist and civic designer at a community-centered design studio in Brooklyn called 3x3. My colleagues and I have been working at the intersection of civic tech and design to explore and pilot what we're calling community-centered AI. and community controlled essential infrastructure that makes AI possible. So community controlled data centers, for example. And we're seeing a lot of interest in this topic. We've recently lectured at the University of Michigan, the Center for Architecture here in New York, SVA. And I think what my testimony it will be about is because I think New York is at a pivotal point when it comes to AI infrastructure. And I was not able to join the technology hearing, so that's why I'm coming today. We believe New York has an opportunity to avoid at this moment repeating a really familiar mistake when it comes to public accountability of digital infrastructure, including AI. For decades, we've allowed essential digital infrastructure to become concentrated in the hands of small companies. And today, as AI rapidly becomes more embedded into aspects of our public life, we are at risk of doing it again. So we spent a decade allowing social media platforms to become de facto public infrastructure without real democratic oversight. And we should not make the same mistake with AI infrastructure. I think of public space as teaching us a really important lesson when something that shapes all of our lives, we don't leave it entirely to private actors. And that is what is happening with AI. As the infrastructure emerges, we should apply that same logic. And something that we have been piloting is a community-centered design stack that looks at different governance models, shared governance mechanisms, as well as technological stacks that can make something like a community-led data center a reality. So we look at models like community solar, community mesh networks as positive examples for this. I have 43 seconds. So I think communities are increasingly being told that they have two options: resist AI entirely and risk being left behind, or adopt systems that are built completely elsewhere outside of New York and accept the costs that come to them. I'm coming to you all to just say that is a false choice. And over the past year, my colleagues and I have been exploring what it would look like if we treat AI as not a product to consume, but as civic infrastructure that communities can collectively shape, govern, and benefit from. If COGE is serious, my last point, if COGE is serious about government efficiency, I encourage everyone here in the commission to broaden the definition of efficiency itself when it comes to AI. Think about not adopting more technology, but efficiency as something that is understood as building systems that are publicly accountable and trusted by the public.
That has to be the end. Thank you so much. Questions, comments? We have none. Thank you for your testimony.
I will submit some stuff in writing as well.
Thank you. And to our small business owner, to our restaurateur, I just want to thank you for how you are serving your community and how you're serving the city. Just expressing gratitude. We know how difficult it is, and we really appreciate all you're doing to help lift up your community in the city. So thank you. Thank you. There are the note from before. Yeah, I'm gonna just pull it, but their names, yeah. So there are 4 small business restaurant operators who I believe are online. We're not entirely certain. I'm going to call out your names. I hope you're still there. I know that you're joining us while you're conducting your business this evening, and so it's challenging. I'll say your names, and if you're there, please join us and testify. And if not, we'll move on. Helen Zhang, Michael Kelly, Rick White, and Megan Rickerson. Helen Zhang, Michael Kelly, Rick White, Megan Rickerson. Are any of you on the line? Looks like we have one. Please join us. Introduce yourself.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Helen Zhang. I'm the owner of Ziggy's Roman Cafe. It's a full-service restaurant at 15 Main Street in Dumbo, Brooklyn. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to walk everyone through my process of submitting for my outdoor dining application and make some recommendations for how to improve the process in the future. I submitted my outdoor dining application on January 20th, 2026. My application was complete and accurate. The DOT confirmed this by February 2nd. The community board review was done by February 17th and approved. And then the city council review wrapped March 31st. The DOT processing began April 2nd, and then by April 22nd, I had cleared the revocable consent payment, and I paid my $1,500 security deposit and the same amount for the revocable consent fee. And then I waited for a long time. I was stuck on the revocable consent registration. This added nearly 2 months to my timeline with really no meaningful public benefit. Without the revocable consent requirement, I would have had my permit by late April, and instead I didn't receive it until about 2 weeks ago in June. That's about 6.5 weeks of lost outdoor revenue on one of the busiest pedestrian corridors in Brooklyn, in Dumbo, right next to Brooklyn Bridge Park, because of one administrative requirement. And here's what the delay actually cost me in time and money that doesn't really show up in the application form. I spent hours and hours personally lobbying to the Commissioner of Small Business Services. I worked with the Hospitality Alliance. I worked with the president of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. I contacted my local council member many, many times. I even connected with someone in Senator Chuck Schumer's office. I hired an independent expediter. All of these conversations took hours, hours I really should have spent running my restaurant, managing my staff, and serving my customers. And we all know that time is money, and that money came directly out of my business. The revocable consent requirement is the single biggest bottleneck in this system. It adds costs, it adds months, and it adds an enormous administrative burden that falls entirely on the small business owner. It's a relic of the past, and it doesn't belong in our modern outdoor dining program. I'm urging this commission to eliminate it. If you do, restaurants like mine can get permitted in weeks instead of half a year. That means tables on sidewalks sooner. That means jobs. It means revenue for the city. And it means an active, beautiful streetscape that makes New York, New York. I spent 5 months fighting for the right to put tables outside my front door. Please, I would love to make sure no one else does the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Is that Michael?
Yes, how are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Michael Kelly. I do not own a restaurant. I filed over 400 sidewalk, roadway, enclosed cafe applications for many clients over the last 2 years under the new program. The reason I had so many is I've been doing this for a long time. People trust me. So I've heard a lot of complaints about how long it takes to approve the applications. There are some clients that still cannot utilize their outdoor dining areas. I try to explain to them the DOT received thousands of applications in the first 4 months, so the agency was overwhelmed. Even new clients who want to start operating quickly won't get that chance. The only way they would is if the DOT brings back the temporary operating letters, which were issued at the start of the program. They stopped doing that. If possible, this could be done after the DOT's approval of the outdoor dining plans and community board approval. We think this would create more jobs and opportunities for the employees, help the owners with their bottom line. It would also create additional tax revenue for the city and state. Another complaint from clients that file for the roadway and sidewalk seating at the same time. I'm finding that they have separate community board hearings for each application, even though they were filed at the same time. If this could be streamlined where both applications are heard at the same time, it would cut down on work for everybody, including the community boards. I know in the beginning of the program in 2024, the roadway cafes were given priority. The sidewalks were given letters to operate. But there are no more temporary operating letters for them. The temporary operating letters would allow them to build. The main complaint is that they paid fees and cannot operate. There are still a lot of roadway cafes that are waiting for their approval to build. I have a lot of complaints about the DOT hearing for the roadway cafe. In my mind, just like when the DCA ran the program, it's a hearing to see if the roadway applications measures up to legal standards. I believe that's already been established by the approval of the plan submitted. It may be a forum where people can complain, but that's normally done at the community board hearing. The delay the roadside cafe process by months. It also costs the restaurants about $783 to post a legal notice in the newspaper. This is an expense that hurts the small and medium-sized restaurants that are trying to survive. It also takes up valuable time at the DOT where hours and person power could be put to better use. Sorry. This hearing also holds up the issuance of the revocable consent.
Michael, you're right at time. I'll let you finish that one thought succinctly,
Okay.
please.
And it holds up the signing of the contract by the mayor's office and registering the contract at the controller's office, which adds about 3 months onto the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Megan Rickerson.
Hi, how are you? I'm Megan Rickerson. I'm the owner of Someday Bar in Borum Hill, Brooklyn. We opened 6 months prior to COVID. So I have done every iteration of outdoor dining in existence, and I've become very adept at navigating all of these ins and outs and all of that. Obviously, we've talked about the revocable consent. The cost, especially if we're talking about how long it's taking for people to get started. To break it down, it's very easy to say outdoor dining is expensive. It's New York, everything's expensive. But just so I can break down some costs to make it digestible, my cost for my sidewalk was $1,775. My street, which I get 16 seats, was $4,573.36. It was $2,000 for an alteration to my liquor license, $3,000 for my lawyer for the dining out application, $1,200 for my survey and HAP certification. My build initially was $24,600. So we get up to $36,000. After that, every year it's $10K to rebuild, plus the additional fees every year. So we're looking at $70,000. And I actually forgot about my posting in the newspapers and all of these other things. That doesn't include labor, the extra people that I'm employing. So every year I have to sell to break even $17,237 in product, in food and in drinks. To make this digestible, I have $3 hot dogs. So that's 5,745 hot dogs. That's $907 burgers, 2,872 happy hour drinks. This is the real cost and the effort that we have to put in to make this viable for our businesses. And again, no labor, no extra things breaking. So if we're waiting 6+ months to get going, think about how many restaurants and bars just missed out on the Knicks hit. So much revenue was lost from small businesses that people really, really needed. And I got lucky that I applied early. I got one of those letters that let me operate, even though I wasn't approved, because that's how early I applied. But our industry isn't about one business, it's about our entire industry. And people are suffering, people need this revenue. So just so when you're thinking about how hard it is for people, we don't want the Wild West. I don't want people just being issued outdoor dining without any type of, inspection or process. But it shouldn't be this hard when we're serving our communities. And we were essential businesses during COVID, and we're still pretty essential. So just when we're talking about these things, keep that in mind. And to the person that spoke about the delivery hub, delivery drivers, keep my business going and alive. So I just want to say that we need to support something that keeps them safe, because I fully lean into that. They're a section of hospitality and they should be taken care of. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you for joining us, Megan. Questions for Megan and Michael and Helen? Questions, comments, thoughts? Great. Thank you all for joining us and pulling yourselves away from your nighttime service. Really appreciate it. We're turning back to the room now. I'd like to call Prisha Srimali and Deborah Green to please join us at the front of the room.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Prisha Sharmali, and I'm a resident of New Jersey who attended and recently graduated from a high school in New York City. I spent the past couple of years researching federal Superfund.
Prisha, I promise you that I'm gonna let you get all the testimony and you don't have to race. You got this.
My apologies.
No, don't apologize. You got this.
I've spent the past couple of years researching federal Superfund policy and urban environmental remediation. I'm here because the structural failures I've studied at the federal level have a direct parallel in how New York City governs its own contaminated sites, and I believe this commission has a real opportunity to fix part of that. Queens sits next to Newtown Creek, which is one of the most contaminated waterways in the country. It became a federal Superfund site in 2010 after more than a century of industrial dumping, sewage overflow, and oil spills along its banks. The EPA's own timeline now estimates that full cleanup of the creek won't even begin until 2032, 22 years after it was listed as a Superfund site. A child born in this neighborhood today will be finishing elementary school before the cleanup even begins. Part of that delay is federal, but part of it is also local. The city's agencies, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Design and Construction, and the Department of City Planning, have no formal process requiring them to plan together around a contaminated site. They operate in parallel, on separate timelines, with separate procurement processes, and no shared vision for what a remediated site becomes. I've studied this pattern in depth through the Quanta Resources Superfund site in my own town, Edgewater, in New Jersey. That site was closed by regulators in 1981, but didn't see active cleanup begin until 2017, 36 years later. Contrary to popular assumption, a significant portion of that delay was not from scientific complexity. It was actually the absence of any coordinated planning framework that brought environmental, land use, and community agencies to the same table at the same time. What I'm asking this commission to consider is a charter amendment establishing an integrated remediation planning requirement for contaminated sites within New York City above a defined threshold. More specifically, when a site reaches a cleanup milestone, like a national priorities list listing, a consent order, or a city designated brownfield designation, the charter would require the Departments of Environmental Protection, Design and Construction, and City Planning to convene within 180 days, develop a joint remediation and land use plan, and publish binding community benefit commitments with a timeline. Contaminated sites requiring this kind of coordinated planning exist in every borough of the city. This integrated remediation planning requirement wouldn't require the city to spend more money. This amendment would add a new requirement to Chapter 57 under the Environmental Remediation chapter of the NYC Charter, as interagency convening doesn't currently exist in the Charter. It would likely be in addition to or live alongside Section 1404, which governs the Office of Environmental Remediation, and Section 192E, which establishes the Mayor's Office of Environmental Coordination to cover review, but not environmental remediation, which is where the structural gap is. The communities living next to Newtown Creek and contaminated sites across Queens and the rest of New York City have waited long enough. What's missing is a government structure that moves quickly to address this public health need. But I believe that this commission can change that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I think you need the mic a little closer. You may have to take it off. All right.
Hi, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Green and I live here in Long Island City. Thank you to the commission for the opportunity to speak. I'm testifying in support of a referendum on open primaries. Mayor Mamdani has stated that one of the goals of this commission is restoring faith in government. What better way to restore faith in government than by ending the long-standing disenfranchisement of almost a quarter of the electorate? I am currently a registered Democrat who voted for Mayor Mamdani in both the primary and the general election. I was acutely aware that the vote that I cast for him in the primary was the one that was more likely to make the difference. I have considered myself an independent and was unaffiliated for decades, but in 2016, during the presidential election, I changed my registration to Democrat because I wanted a say in who could appear on the ballot in November. Many registered Democrats and probably many Republicans as well have made that same calculation. In my congressional district, number 7, which has an open seat for the first time in 34 years. Only 77% of the electorate can vote in the primaries, shutting out 106,783 unaffiliated voters. Now, I recognize that the charter only deals with municipal elections, but I offer this as this example of a congressional district to show the extent of the problem. Of those who can vote in my district, 70% are registered Democrats. In a hyper-partisan district such as mine, the election is decided on primary day. So almost a quarter of registered voters are excluded from participating in the most important and decisive phase of candidate selection. Meanwhile, many independents, like myself, are disguising themselves as Democrats just so they can vote in the primary. As the proportion of non-affiliated voters continues to climb, some polls put it at nationally at 45% of registered voters, more than the registration by the Democrat or the Republican. It's obvious that our closed primaries cannot truly be considered fair or representative. We must not lose this chance to allow all registered New York City voters to participate in a renewal of our political system. I urge the Commission on Government Efficiency to put open primaries on the New York City ballot this November. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. Questions, thoughts, comments from our commissioners? Emma, please.
Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. I was out there at the same time you were preparing, and you nailed it. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what you think the city can do, charter versus not charter, on the issue that you raised on Superfunds and remediation?
Yes, so this is a bit of a tricky area, as the Superfund program under the EPA is technically under federal oversight. So in order to not overstep, this would have to be carefully done at the local level. The main point that I raised within my testimony was an integrated remediation planning requirement. And this IRP would mostly be focusing on bringing together different agencies across land use, agencies involved in funding, as well as the Department of Environmental Protection. The three I named were Departments of Environmental Protection, Design and Construction, and City Planning, but there may be more that would need to be involved as well. In addition to my testimony, I also believe a three-tiered liability allocation system would be important, because right now the EPA operates under a polluter pays principle, which is in agreement with a lot of local systems that it is a fair model to use. However, different polluters are charged differently depending on what they can pay, as opposed to how large the operation is and how much they've contributed to contamination over the years. And this ties into the need for an integrated remediation planning requirement, because if those in charge of determining which of the three tiers of funding intensity should be assigned to different polluters under the polluter pays principle, they must be at the same table as those who are in charge of assessing the different contaminants in especially waterfront sites, rivers, as well as the soil and the air, because the different degrees of the contaminants that are present can determine the different degrees to which polluters have had involvement over the years, which is why it's essential to have them all at the table at the same time. And in addition to that, also on the funding side, it's important to adjust for inflation, because a lot of the funding allocations, because this is a slow crawling process, were initially set out in the 1980s, 1970s, when a lot of these sites were established. And I believe at that time, according to the Consumer Price Index, it was around 90, which is now 300. So about a 3.3 increase in adjustment for inflation. So a lot of remediation projects tend to fall within the 10 to hundreds of millions range, which accounts for a significant gap in funding. And in addition to the three-tiered liability allocation system, this could allow for a better funding process. And in addition, with the integrated remediation planning requirement, could allow for a smoother process with those in charge of the scientific aspects.
Excellent. Thank you both for your well-researched testimony. Appreciate it. Thank you. Mary Anil and Damian Archbold.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dear Chair and Commissioners, greetings. My name is Mary Anil. I hail from Astoria, Queens. I have been an Astoria resident for 29 years. I have been a New York City government employee.
I'm sorry to do this to you, but is it possible to shut the door? We're getting lots of, oh, it's above us. Sorry. Apologies. Maybe that'll help a bit. Thank you. So sorry.
I'll start again. Dear Chair and Commissioners, greetings. My name is Mary Anil. I hail from Astoria, Queens. I have been an Astoria resident for 29 years. I have been a New York City government employee since 2007. I have a master's degree in public administration from Baruch College and a doctoral degree in political science from CUNY Graduate Center. My testimony for today's hearing will be on New York City Charter, Chapter 50, term limits. I'm also planning to submit testimonies on New York City Charter, Chapter 36, Equal Employment Practices Commission, and Section 31, Advice and Consent for Corporation Counsel and other positions. The New York City term limits imposes a limit of 2 consecutive terms for the offices of mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough presidents, and 51 city council members. There have been significant changes to local elections. The primaries are now in June instead of September. Our local elections have become more competitive, and this is what citizens in a healthy democracy should expect and should want. What I have been noticing recently is that many incumbent elected officials are running simultaneously for offices. As an example, I live in Congressional District 7. All 3 candidates are incumbents. They are actively campaigning. 2 are term limited, Brooklyn Borough President and Council Member for District 26. In the last mayoral elections, including the primaries, many incumbent elected officials, term limited or not, campaigned. Mayor Zohran Mamdani was also an incumbent elected official, my New York State Assembly member. He has campaigned hard and won. I wish him much success as our mayor. This commission is about government efficiency and improving governance. If many incumbents are running for other offices in competitive elections and are campaigning for 6 or 10 months, then I worry about our governance. In addition, until Mayor Mamdani released his 2025 tax returns, I thought he was on unpaid leave from his New York Assembly office during his campaigning. My good citizen proposal for this commission is that you consider including a question on the ballot for elected officials who intend to run for other local, state, or national offices as incumbents. In my opinion, they should either take unpaid leave of absence during their campaigning, or they should wait to complete their term to run for other offices. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. When Mayor Mamdani was inaugurated, he said that New Yorkers had chosen big ideas over, sorry, he had chosen big ideas over money in politics. I'm a doctor at Elmhurst Hospital in Queens. I live here in Long Island City, and I wanted to lift up what I heard from Antonio Solis and Ligia Walpa about the 80,000 deliveristas. I'm an anesthesiologist. I take care of people who end up in the emergency department requiring lots of surgery over weeks. The state of our public spaces and roads are a public health issue. And I think the city charter could be amended to have a health in all policies section, which better integrates our health services so that the Department of Transport and city planning are working together, a little bit like we heard before. There are multiple different city agencies who don't communicate with each other, and multiple different health worker unions who don't communicate with each other. And my view on that is patients arriving to the emergency department in escalating numbers since COVID, with a understaffed, overcrowded emergency department, with a demoralized and rapidly turning over health workforce, which is fragmented into different services, with EMS workers disgracefully paid, not enough community health workers, not enough focus on prevention and public health as infrastructure, rather on revenue generation and funneling public money to private interests in healthcare. So if we're talking about efficiency, New York State spends more money on health per capita than any other state, but our outcomes are hugely disparate, particularly between the public and private sectors. And another modest proposal would be to integrate the health sector of New York City and have a single contract across each health worker. In my hospital, we have at least 10 different unions. They have no coordination across each other, no shared demands. And bringing it back to public space, the public hospitals in New York City are anchor institutions, and they employ 44,000 New Yorkers. And those people integrated with
You're
public
right,
health.
time, Damien. Gonna wrap up.
Yep. So the modest proposal would be sectoral bargaining for health workers in New York City.
Great. Thank you both. Questions, comments? Great. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. I see that Councilmember Phil Wong has joined us. Councilman, I'd love to invite you to share your test. Understood. We can all relate. Since the councilman has asked for 2 minutes, I'd like to turn to a participant online, Henry Smith. Henry, are you with us? We can't hear you, Henry. If you can, you seem to be muted.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yep, we have you now.
Sorry, I won't take up too much time, but yeah, I'm the Director of Economic Development and the LIC Business Improvement District at the Long Island City Partnership. The Long Island City Partnership's mission is to advocate for economic development that benefits LIC's industrial, commercial, science and technology, cultural, residential sectors. And we also operate the Business Improvement District. Our organization works daily with city agencies to keep our streets clean, our public spaces functional, and our neighborhoods safe. Now more than ever, New Yorkers want to be outside, and neighborhoods, I feel, are defined by their public space. As the local bid, we continue to look for opportunities to create events, to engage our residents and businesses, and create a thriving economy through public space. We, if in recent years, have found some struggles creating those opportunities due to limitations of high insurance requirements, extensive, PDC process, and the long time contracting processes for, long-term streetscape amenities. Additionally, with public spaces, they rarely consider maintenance plans for long-term parks and public spaces. One example of that is Dutch Kills Green. It's been a major issue for recent years. Parks Department used to clean it, and a couple of years ago, Parks determined it was no longer their responsibility. Since then, our organization was forced to fund DOT to clean and maintain the space with their staff and their requirements, and it took a lot of advocacy and follow-up to hold DOT accountable for cleaning it up. Also want to mention that the 311 system, our organization has very fortunate to have connections at the city agencies to push forward streetscape cases and quality of life cases, but we know many New Yorkers don't have that luxury, and 311 has very limited communication capabilities, and it has really been, a problem with not only just cases being closed immediately, but also to have the follow-up and discussion needed to resolve these quality of life issues that are crucial to public safety and neighborhood vibrancy. Also, the DOT has been very slow at pushing forward with our lighting requests. We have submitted 10 plus lighting for very standard streetscape lighting that is crucial, for public safety in a growing neighborhood like Long Island City, especially in the industrial area. And over the past 4 years, we've still been hearing that the lighting has been stuck in contracting delays. With that, thank you so much for your time and considerations, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Questions, comments for Henry? None. Thank you so much for your testimony. Council member, please, if you would. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Phil Wong, representing the 30th City Council District in Queens, which covers the neighborhoods of Middle Village, Maspeth, Elmhurst, Ridgewood, Glendale, and Rico Park. I sit on the council's Finance Committee, Committee on Public Safety, Transportation, and many more. Now, I'm going to be direct because the taxpayers I represent don't have time for anything else. New York City has a $10 billion budget gap in the upcoming fiscal year. That's a fact. However, the state comptroller is more pessimistic. He said it could hit 13.6 billion at the present growth rate by 2029. And this did not happen because of bad luck. It happened because we've been lying to ourselves in the budget, chronically under budgeting the same line items year after year and acting surprised when the bills come due. The charter should require honest multi-year budget baselines, not any artificial numbers that were cooked up. It should fix the rainy day fund so we actually save for a crisis instead of spending the money before the storm arrives. And it should require that the mayor's management report to tell New Yorkers where the programs actually work, not just how much we spend on them. Here's what not working looks like. We are spending $352 a night, $128,000 a year per person to house people in hotel rooms as emergency shelters. And quite often, those are no-bid contracts. The homeless population still grew 26% while spendings triple. The charter should require cost-effectiveness reviews before the city signs billion-dollar contracts and tie those contracts to real outcomes, like how many people actually made it into permanent housing, not how many people are stuffed into a hotel shelter. Here's what else isn't working. I know my time is
Oh,
limited.
don't worry, Councilman.
Okay.
We have you.
New York City has schools with fewer than 100 students. Right now, there are over 200 of these schools right now with fewer than 100 students enrolled per building, per school building. Some spending over $63,000 per student with poor outcomes and shrinking enrollment. The charter should require a consolidation process for those schools. It's simply ineffective to fund empty seats and empty schools. But I can tell you it is happening right now to over 200 schools in this city. And we need to end the whole harmless policy, the rule that lets schools keep full funding for students they no longer have. 2/3 of our schools have lower enrollment than budgeted this year, and 250 million is sitting in their budgets paying for ghost students. That money should follow actual children to actual classrooms. Finally, the water bill, my water bill, is being used as a backdoor tax. 313 million in ratepayer funds quietly funneled into general city expenses, while they were legitimately collected as payments to maintain our water system. Now think about that. The charter should prohibit that, because that money is supposed to be used to fix our sewers, waters, and drainage systems, not for plugging in budget holes or gaps for programs that don't work. And my constituents constantly flood with DEP doing little or nothing to fix it. Okay, I will sum up.
I'll give you 30 more seconds,
Okay,
Councilman.
the residents of District 30 work hard, pay their taxes, and follow the rules. They ask only that our government do the same. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so very much. Councilman, I'm sure that our commission members will have some comments, questions, thoughts for you. Henry, please.
Hello.
Councilman, how are you?
Good evening. Yes.
You know, the school is not a function of the charter, but a function of the state as an authority, separate from the charter law. So any amendment to the school law would require state intervention, and the charter is a local or.
But the mayor has control of the schools, and he's the one that's keeping all these schools open, keeping them empty while funding them at full capacity.
That control is granted to him by the state, and it constantly gets renewed over that. The state still keeps control over the school opening and the school size. So I'm only saying that because part of our limitation as a commission is what we can do in the city charter without the state. Now, we are also talking about what other things we could recommend to the state, to the mayor about the state and changes. But as far as the charter goes, school closure is not one of those.
Well, while the mayor has control of the schools, you can certainly write to the charter that the school should be funded per child, but not at the capacity of the school. Like we have school now that's fully funded at full capacity, but in fact, we have fewer than 100 students enrolled. And I've been keeping track. I'm in the education committee. I sat in the school board for 4 years. I know they're out there and I know where they are. So anytime I reach out, I can tell you where they are, and I can even call the school to tell you that these schools really should be combined. I'm not saying close them. They should be combined, and that's the way it was before the COVID, but now they don't do that anymore, and it's bleeding money, and it makes no sense to do that.
Thank you, Councilman. Other interventions from commission members? None. Councilman, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your contribution. So we have 15 minutes before the conclusion of this hearing. There are a number of you who still hope to be able to testify. I'm going to be like really tough on the 3 minutes and then the Q&A portion as well. So let's see if we can kind of blitz through a number of you before 8 p.m. Alan Cox and India B, if you'll join us.
Good evening. Thank you guys for hearing us.
Good evening.
Sorry. My name is India B. I'm a local beekeeper. I'm here with my daughter Memphis. I'm also advocate and a parent to a child on the spectrum. I'm here today to talk about sensory inclusion. I started an organization a couple years ago where I pop up in public places and private spaces, providing headphones, fidget spinners, weighted vests for children and adults within the neurodivergent community. A lot of parents like myself, we love this city, but the city is beautiful, noisy chaos. And a lot of our loved ones cannot function in that. So coming here today on the train, I saw an ad. It said, get a grip, allow everyone to hold on to the pole. And that's what I'm asking for the committee today, to allow us to hold on to the pole and support our loved ones. I'm asking for a dedicated brick and mortar sensory space. I have done this space in other places, in churches and community centers where because of my lived experience and my education, I recently graduated with a graduate degree from CUNY on disability studies. And I've been able to transform spaces with dim lights, just the smallest touches to make it inclusive for everyone and everyone to feel welcome. I love this city, but my daughter has a hard time navigating it. And sometimes in restaurants, we walk around with backpacks. Well, I've also supplied restaurants with this busy bag. It's a backpack with headphones, weighted vests, and it's on a menu, and they can order it like a menu item. It's beyond crayons and paper because not everyone can use that to calm their spaces. I am asking the committee to work with us to, I guess, be human and just advocate for those who may not have a voice. If we all live to be like maybe my grandmother's age, 80 or 90, we will all need someone to advocate for us. And we would want them to include, we would want them to be able to say, this is what India would want, or this is what Memphis would want. New York City has invited us, but sometimes we don't feel welcome. I wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us. And once again, I'm asking that this place that we call home can open so many places that look shut down and help us to have a dedicated space for those to come in and calm down. Thank you.
Thank you. India, your daughter's name is Memphis?
Yes.
Well, she's absolutely beautiful, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for being a moral conscience on this issue.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan Cox. I'm a lifelong New Yorker, born in Harlem and living in the Bronx. I'm a community health outreach worker with COPE, the Coalition for Positive Health Empowerment. I'm also the father of 4 children, 2 of them living in New York City. My daughter and I are both independents. I'm one of those New Yorkers that has played basketball all my entire life, from pickup games in Harlem and South Jamaica. I've played with some great athletes like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Nate Tiny Archibald. I've been around long enough to play the game before the Knicks' last championship, and I'm still playing now in the Old Timers League. I've been a referee for the PSAL for the last decade. I love the game. It's a team sport, and I'm thrilled to see the Knicks win with their grit and determination. Yay, Knicks. And bring the city together in such a celebration of what it means to be a New Yorker. So here we are, the Knicks in basketball. Have brought our city together. Unfortunately, our politics do not. We don't treat all our voters the same way. Not everyone not everyone is in the game. You can't tell people we're obligated to vote, given that so many of our people fought and died for that right to vote, and at the same time have a system where 1.2 million folks who are independents are shut out of voting in the primaries. And that's where most decisions are made of who will be our elected official. Malcolm X once said that American democracy is American hypocrisy. I think it's time for us to do what 85% of cities in the US do. Let our primaries be more democratic and let independents vote.
Thank you so very much for that testimony. Questions, comments, thoughts? Please.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, India, for raising that. I'm not sure what the charter can do about it, and there are experts here that will know that. But I wanted to connect you with other additional resources about that are not bound to the charter. But I will do that with you after this.
Thank you.
Thank you both. I
And
know that.
thanks to your daughter for testifying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Taiwan Green and Terry Renee Ewart Green. The two of you could not be more New York between your Yankees and Knicks.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to I have my testimony. Can everybody hear me?
We can, yes.
My name is Taiwan Green, though most people know me as Mr. Fingers. I'm a lifelong resident of Southeast Queens. I'm a music educator, community advocate, and small business owner who works throughout the community. I'm here today because I believe New York City must do a better job of coordinating its agencies and responding to quality of life concerns that residents and businesses face every day. Last October, I organized a community cleanup at Jamaica Center with dozens of volunteers. We worked very hard to remove litter and improve the area. Unfortunately, by the very next day, it looked as though we had never been there. That experience showed me that the community members cannot solve these issues alone. We need city agencies working together with residents in a coordinated, sustained way. One major issue is sanitation. For years, there's been stretches of Jamaica Avenue with very few public garbage cans. As a result, trash accumulates and the area suffers. We also have serious problem with public restroom problem. People are often forced to relieve themselves near transit facilities because there are few accessible public restrooms available. Why isn't there any public restroom serving one of the busiest transport hubs in Queens? I believe the city should create a dedicated Jamaica's task force to bring together Department of Sanitation, Department of Transportation, MTA, NYPD, and local businesses, community leaders to address this issue in a coordinated manner. I'm also concerned about traffic and transportation changes along the Jamaica Avenue and and Hillside Avenue. Many local businesses and business owners believe recent traffic patterns and bus lane configurations have reduced access to business, limiting parking and contributed to economic challenges throughout this corridor. Traffic on Hillside Avenue is frequently backed up because of the lane reductions, and residents in neighborhoods such as Cambridge Heights face increasing difficulties navigating their own communities, even being asked to show identification. For implementing major transportation changes, the city should conduct a regular impact assessments to create a process and meaningful feedback from residents, homeowners, and small business owners, and find better ways to promote the hearing. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Terry Renee.
Okay, hello everyone. So I did have a question, but it is not aligned with tonight's event. So I just want to have a talk about an observation that I've had. I've been attending public hearings throughout New York City, and I'm always left with the same question: where is everyone at? Where is my community at? I know tons of business owners in my community who would have loved to be here, either in person or online, who just don't know about this. And I know this because when I post about it, everyone will be underneath it saying, how did you find out about it? I found out about it a couple of hours before it started today. So I guess when it comes to resources, if a resource is not being used, you can't navigate it, you don't know where to find it, you might as well not have it exist, right? It's the same thing. It's like if it doesn't exist because you can't navigate it. So how can the commission work towards getting this information out to the public? I do know that different generations receive information differently. So not everyone's on social media, not everyone, maybe some people are getting snail mail like my mom, and that's how they get information. So in what ways can the commission work to further give information specifically about public hearings? Because I feel like it's important for the representation to be in the room for everyone. I am a community health worker and I care deeply about inclusivity, equity, fairness, and yeah. So I just wanted to take that to bring that point.
We'll take it under serious advisement. You can imagine that our thoughtful and careful staff of this commission used every platform imaginable to reach out, both traditional and non-traditional communication to associations, to groups, everyone that we could. And fortunately, we have 6 additional hearings, and we're going to take into consideration some of your suggestions or recommendations about how we can amplify this information to make sure that those who would love to be able to participate have an opportunity to do so. Taiwan, I want to just personally thank you for the work that you're doing to try to lift up the spirit of Southeast Queens. It's important work. My mother lives in St. Albans, so I understand all of the infrastructure challenges that you just described. That is a community that is often forgotten. So thank you so very much for this work. In the interest of time, I'm not taking any further questions from commission members. I really want to get into last members of this community to testify tonight, but your recommendations are taken in and appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I do just want to say thank you for having the testimonies being heard online. A lot of other places do not do that. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for noting that. We're trying to be 21st century. We're trying here. So the last 2 that we'll be able to hear from tonight are Robert Brown and Zachary Thomas. I apologize to those of you in person and online who waited out the evening, who hoped to be able to testify, but we just couldn't get to you tonight. You have an opportunity to submit your testimony in writing. If you go to our website, it's very, very clear how you can submit your testimony. And you also have an opportunity, if you so choose, to appear at another one of the public hearings that we will have across the city. So please, Robert and Zachary.
Good evening, Chair Gaspard and fellow members of the commission, and thank you to fellow New Yorkers for offering insightful ideas and roadmaps at this hearing. My name is Zachary Thomas, and I serve on the Parks Committee of Community Board 3 in Manhattan, although I recently moved to Long Island City, so thank you for being here. Earlier this year, a fellow board member and I set out to address a critical gap at Thompson Square Park in the East Village. Of the 58 trees that surround the park, only 7 have protective tree guards. This really sucks. This means that 90% of the park's perimeter trees are left completely exposed to soil compaction, vehicle strikes, and animal waste poison, highly preventable causes of tree death. We didn't ask the city for a handout. Instead, we partnered with our neighbors and raised $1,000 to purchase a standard pre-approved metal tree guard through the New York City Parks Tree Time program. We submitted our donation on January 30th of this year. Unfortunately, as of today, nearly 5 months later, that single simple tree guard has not yet been installed. To put that in perspective, since January 30th, the New York Knicks basketball team has played 54 basketball games, including win the NBA championship. Our city's administrative apparatus requires more time to install a single tree guard. When proactive citizens are met with months of silence and administrative delays, it discourages civic participation and erodes public trust. Thankfully, there may be ways to amend the city charter to restore faith in local government and empower entrepreneurial New Yorkers who want to help their community. First is making it easier for New York City Parks and other agencies to hire and retain quality candidates to execute on promises to residents. Our main contact for the tree guard at Parks has already left the department, and the new ones aren't really responding to my emails. For Parks and more institutional knowledge within his ranks, it might not need a public-private partnership like Tree Time to install tree guards. Next, we may need to examine procurement rules so that agencies can respond to common resident requests like installing more tree guards. That might look like raising the direct purchase threshold for agencies in Chapter 13 of the city charter, or exempting routine purchases from the full capital process. I'm still really excited about this tree guard, and I'm waiting for it to get installed. And as it turns out, raising the money was the easy part. I hope voters this fall can receive ballot propositions that amend the charter to make local government more responsive to not just resident complaints, but New Yorkers who are trying to help out. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you, Council, for having this and having us. I'm not going to take up much of your time. I've sort of organized what I'm here to testify about in 3 small topics. First one just would be to advocate for open primaries, just, you know, in a sense of just looking at the fact that most of the population of the city, at least a fair amount, identifies that. And a lot of times, you know, people identify as a Democrat or even in some cases a Republican just to be able to fit it. But usually we would, you know, a lot of people would like to remain independent as some form of leverage due to the fact that us as younger generations, and I mean especially younger Gen X's, Gen Z's, millennials, who have been longtime residents, longtime taxpayers, feel excluded from what major parties, platforms, and policies address. So, for example, many of our hardest hitting or most important issues, such as maintaining and obtaining housing while also, you know, staying fiscally responsible, something that, you know, we've noticed and experienced it from other generations, but this generation is having a lot more time doing that. And one of my proposals is, you know, for us to try to cut as much red tape and bureaucracy where we can without sacrificing safety for things like building infrastructure, building more housing, and also regulating it in a way that all citizens can participate. You know, we all pay taxes, we all contribute to the city, we should all have a fair shot. And also to add to a few other points that was mentioned earlier, you know, a lot of general economic reforms as far as small businesses and smaller businesses and businesses that are just starting out to obtain city procurement opportunities and contracts and other things of that sort, and sort of have more of a outreach approach, sort of like was mentioned a lot earlier, to those and to get those resources to these people, you know, and to have, you know, to market them and have them available. So basically, yeah, we just, you know, want to testify for just a little more inclusion into how the city works and how the city operates and
Great.
to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. Appreciate your testimony. We don't have time for questions, but again, thank you for the time you've taken to be so thoughtful and informing our process. Really appreciate it. I also want to thank everybody else who testified tonight and would love to share with you all. If you're here and you wanted to testify and you could not and would like to submit your testimony, you can do so at nyc.gov/COGE. That's nyc.gov/COGE. Thank you to everyone for your testimony. Thank you to the staff at the Department of Design and Construction for your support this evening. Thank you to our stenographer and to our interpreter for making this an accessible and welcoming event. The next public hearing of this commission will be held tomorrow on Staten Island at 5 p.m. at the Staten Island University North Regina McGinn Center, second floor auditorium. That's at 475 Seaview Avenue. It will focus on ideas for savings from efficiencies, but like today, we'll welcome testimony from any New Yorkers who are interested in impacting the charter process. I'd like to bring this hearing to a close. Is there a motion to adjourn this hearing? Is there a second? All in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned.